Clearly, there's a huge barrier. Like,
man, when you actually
I just don't get
when
it.
you uncover this, it's going to be like the biggest relief. Like we're not even leaving until we find it. So I don't think I've ever had one of these where it's so clear that it's a success barrier. Everything lines up to the fact that like you're a rational thinker that's just getting backdoored by something that we need to bring awareness to, so that it can just dissolve in the light of your rationalness.
Because I'm having as much or more of an issue with it now that I'm on. That's why I was bringing it up. Now that I'm on my own for 2-5, I'm actually still as likely or more likely to be staying in my comfort zone of 2-5 than taking these 5-10 shots, as opposed to like 2-5 should be like maybe scarier now because it's my own money, but it's still the comfort zone. You know what I mean? So the barrier is still this not the barrier, but the issue is still this 5-10 feeling like larger than life or bigger or scarier or whatever it is.
I think the reason that you're developing more sensitivity to it is because you're nearing the end of the exploration of this paradigm. Like in both results, like it's time results wise. You've been green lighted a long time ago, so your conscious knows it's time, and your subconscious also knows I have explored this paradigm enough to know that I don't want to continue fighting against this current. Like I think you know that on a deep level, that like the frustration is largely the fact that there is no answer from the level that you're operating from. So we need to find how to surrender the belief that lets us play from a higher level. Like, this is a weird thing, but if you just think of it in terms of like levels of the ocean, almost like you're on the bedrock level, trapped under this belief. There are people that are 3 levels above you that are operating free from that belief, and that reality is completely supported and contained already. So like the things that you think might be your responsibility to manage, the stress that you perceive in this big shift, it's not actually, that's not how it works once you operate from the belief systems that are aligned with higher performance. What actually happens is you start to see that the attitude, the beliefs, the feeling state, the decision quality that you were so afraid of being able to sustain at the higher level is just naturally available to you once you stop engaging that bedrock belief. It's almost like this level contains higher quality thoughts, feelings, and identity belief systems, and this level is literally a different version of you. Like, I know this sounds almost woo-woo, but like having gone through paradigms and journaling and remembering what it felt like to be in a lower paradigm as opposed to a higher paradigm, like I literally felt like I was toggling through parallels of myself. So I'm preparing you for basically, if you believe that the Berk that you currently are is the one that's going to have to hold the weight of 5'10", I'm saying that's not how it is.
Okay.
You're literally going to drop that victimized version of yourself that feels like it's got to manage everything, and you're going to float up into a deeper, a more aligned version of you that is already rational and just has exited all the paranoid, neurotic stuff that's holding you down. So there's this idea that it's like learning through subtraction. I really like this concept. Nassim Taleb, I think, talks about it, where he's much more concerned with how can I get better through removing things as opposed to adding things. And with mindset work, I think it's I'm trying to get everybody to actually understand that you're already a winner. You're already the 5'10" player on the mindset level. You just have to stop telling yourself the stories that convince you that you're not, or that you can't handle the stress of that limit. So I really want to pry at, I want you to continue, I basically want to rapid fire have you try to give me objections to why you aren't ready yet. So let's start with just like the basic one, like the bankroll requirement. I don't think you can make a clean objection because you're staked, and we could solve that thing in a half hour here together. I could set you up with a 40 buy-in base. I could say every time you make 10 buy-ins, I want you to take a 2 buy-in shot at 10-20 even. And when you have an 80 buy-in base at 5-10, we'll move up to 10-20 permanently. If you ever lose more than 10 buy-ins at 5-10, we'll move back down to 2-5. Like, we can do that in a half hour.
Yeah.
So let's not talk bankroll management because it's a very simple thing. So what's next? What would be next? And when you have to envision the stress of the unknown and then like sense into an element of the unknown, if you had to pluck something out of that unknown that generates some fear, and this could be anything from like, how would I explain it to people? I had a student who even was guilty about moving up in stakes because now he'd be making so much money that his friends see him as like a lucky human who's ungrateful almost. So you may have to play with this, and I want to leave you, if we don't find it, I want to leave you with a very clear path of how you're going to go about dismantling this in your own time. So the process is extremely simple now that we know what's happening. The unknown of the 5-10 reality and above is creating this force field that locks you into a success barrier. And the lack of, because that's an uncomfortable force field, you're 50 and you haven't dismantled it yet.
Right.
So we're going to go into it consciously now as a practice, daily if it takes, and continue to pick elements out of that unknown until it's no longer unknown.
Okay.
And then it can't backdoor you, because it is the lack of attention paid to mapping the unknown that causes it to continue to have power over you. Like, this is why I think it's cool for small stakes players to speak to high stakes players about the reality of high stakes, because a lot of the conceptions that you have about the pressures or stressors or how good the regs are at high stakes, that's not occurring in my reality as a high stakes winner. And that's very helpful because it can cleanse the biases that you may have that are working against you or feel like pressure, and those things aren't even true.
Okay.
So talk to me about what do you fear? Is like, do you fear that the regs are just going to be that good?
Outplayed by regs, yeah, that's one of them. I think even if it's not my money, the fear of losing it's a thing. Like, it's whatever stake I'm in.
How much could we lose though?
I mean, like, that's true. Like, logically, I get that. Not much. Okay, max, like probably 6K.
Let's do this. Your sample size is clearly, beyond the shadow of a doubt, large proven winner. Do you fear you would ever become a loser?
No, see,
like, assuming variance is going to remain, relatively fair, like it will if we play enough hands, we need to dismantle this in the same way that we dismantled the fear around you not being able to show up and just pick the 2-5 game if the 5-10 game is strong. Like, could you, let's not just leave it as this uninvestigated fear of like, well, I could lose. No, like, let's map out what would have to happen for that to become an actual problem. You would have to lose all control over your current skill set, pick poor games, and maybe run at the bottom end of the entire variance barrel.
Sorry, I don't mean if I play I could lose longer, and that's because I agree with you. Like, that's not conceivable to me, like becoming a losing player in that lineup, so that's good.
What is it about losing today that, because if it's not the money, like the fact that you're staked helps because it separates the fact that this isn't a financial stress.
Other than, like the only financial stress it used to be able to, and to a much lesser extent has on me now, is like, say, not being able to, being in makeup or not having profit to cash out, thus not having cash available to me for bills or life or whatever else. But it would have to be, at this point, if I'm playing 2-5 on my own, I obviously have some money now that I didn't before. It would have to be several months, basically, and that's pretty unlikely. And the reason I laughed a minute ago when you're like, you could lose, is if I look at the worst day I've ever had, it's not bad. If I look at the worst downtick I've had at 2-5 or 5-10, they're lower than just about anybody. They're not big numbers. Like, the worst thing that's ever happened isn't the worst thing that could ever happen, but it gives me an idea of what the
perspective
worst thing that
over
could ever happen.
So here's where I want to go.
Bad.
Do you believe that something could happen that threw you so far out of whack with your skill set that you could become a losing player? Is playing 5-10, like regs aside, skill of regs, because largely that's a projection that's occurring. You don't really know how good they are, and I'm telling you, they're really not good.
That's true.
If you have win rate at 500, you're usually still going to be able to beat 1K handily, because largely most of your win rate comes from fish anyway. So time and again I've seen that the irrational fear that is backdooring people in this little conversation that we're having right now, specifically the idea of I could lose, it's largely a product of not understanding that you are way more in control over operating your skill set than the irrational mind thinks. Like, for a while, I would get triggered when I would envision downswings, especially downswings that occurred at stakes that were, higher than I was playing. My mind would go into this place of being like, and then I'm gonna spiral out of control and never be able to recover my game. And for me, that was true, because I had a week where when I was on a downswing, I would begin to play differently and start to get over aggressive, and then I'd get my legs clipped out from under me. So it was a real fear. So that it needs to be investigated consciously. Do you believe that you could lose enough money that could cause you to tilt for a prolonged period of time, and then you have something to really fear because you've lost your edge? Is that a fear?
No.
Okay, cool. That's good. Because if that was, that might be a week's worth of deep work.
Yeah, no, I don't.
So you're getting
I
closer.
I can see how it would happen to somebody. I could see how it's possible. Tilt's not really a thing that I have an issue with.
And game selection is something that we just discussed could be done very rationally by arriving at the casino and scoping a table.
My only fear of not being a winning player is super, super long term, where the games continue to get tougher. It takes a lot of work to stay current these days, let alone to be moving up like I've done the last few years. It takes a lot of work and a lot of study. But if that tends to level out, and say my faculties tend to decrease at some point, like 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, but that's a completely unrelated to fear to the issue I'm having right now. But that's, if we're asking, can you envision yourself ever not being a winning player?
There's like some sort of extrapolation to a reality where like online players talk about like bots taking over. It's almost like kind of what this sounds like.
Like if it's a long-reaching, at some point that's possible, and hopefully I'll recognize it and not just be sitting there.
And if we think about it, if we just only let it be the abstract thing in the head, it is the thought that serves as an excuse for us not to perform today. Coming back to that sentence is going to help you distill any of these questions that you may have about whether or not this thing is really, whether or not the element of the unknown that I'm thinking about right now is really a actual problem, or if it's just an irrational success barrier that causes me to basically use it as an excuse. So here's what I see that's good. You understand variance. You trust that you won't lose your edge even if you go on a downswing.
Sure.
You seem to have a structural understanding that you are rolled for the limit that you're shooting. And there is so this is the fourth that I think we need to go into, is all that's good, because we've taken a lot of the unknown and just kind of pushed it off the table, and what's left for me is, how do you perceive your win rate at the higher limit? Because if I could get into your mind and see the degree of confidence that you have a 5 BB plus win rate at 510, I think we'd be having a different story, or a different conversation. I sense that you wouldn't be able to have this success barrier if you were 100% certain that you were a winner in those higher games. And I mean 100%. So, because I think it would feel to you like 2-5 does right now. It would feel like your comfort zone instead of the unknown. So maybe it's simpler than we're even making it out to be by saying, what would have to happen for you to have 100% confidence that you were a winner at 510 and that you belonged there? Even if, here's one. Are you okay with not being the best reg at the table? Because you don't need to be to have win rate. Your win rate's coming mostly from fish. That's how it always works.
pretty much never the best reg at 510. And
I don't see you as a guy that's really got like a huge ego at the table either.
No.
So like, I think you have a balanced perspective that you're there to pick up your edge, and that's that. So I'm really trying to find why you don't have 100% confidence that it's time to play 510 as if it's 2-5. Accept the fact that it's labeled a different limit. Like, if we really distill it down, what is different? And if you tell me it's the quality of the regs, then I'm saying, okay, so that's fine. Like, granted, and our win rate is still 5 BBs and there's still fish, and you don't care about being the best reg, so let's take it further. What else could it be? If we establish that the regs are slightly better and your win rate might be slightly lower,
and there's more of them.
But ultimately that conversation distills down to a new win rate for you.
True.
And I'm telling you, it's very, very unlikely that with your current win rate at 2-5 that you're not going to be winning substantially at 510.
Right.
And you need to play 510 so you can get better by observing the better regs. So like, that's got to happen anyway.
That's fair. And like a friend of mine points out, when I'm talking about how tough these games are or whatever, there's only 1 or 2 fish, and there's like a couple better than average guys in this lineup. There's like 5, regs that are always there, but there's a couple like 10, 20 guys or whatever, like, or some of the best of the best. It's like, well, when you sit down, you don't just give them your stack. Like, when there's
That's not how it works.
Like far and above, like there can be somebody who's head and shoulders above the table. Like if you sat down in a 5-10 game, right? Clearly have like a skill edge against everyone there to varying degrees, but even significant against the second best guy there, right? But you don't just get his money.
It's not how it works.
Like, that's not how it works.
It does work that way to the irrational mind, though.
And at the end of the year, yeah, your pile is going to be bigger because you're not only are you getting money from the fish. Well, you're going to isolate and you're going to play more hands against them, so you get even a bigger piece of the pie from the fish. But you're getting like a medium amount from the bad regs, and you're getting a small amount from the good regs. Like you're just at the top of the pyramid, you get all the money, but that doesn't mean that you just get my stack, right? So I'm still allowed to win from all these guys that are worse than me, and lose a little bit here and a little bit here, and a medium amount to you.
Yes.
And still take my 8 big blinds an hour, and thanks.
That's the structural clarity that I feel like every player needs before they move up a limit. Because if we don't do that, if we don't have a very granular conversation about where edge is coming from, we stand to play these tricks on ourselves like, oh, there's better regs and there's enough of them that my edge is destroyed, and you forget that your win rate's coming from fish and that you don't just hand your stack to the better reg, you still got to win it from you. So what I like is we're at a place right now where if we're going to distill everything down, we're arriving at a place where all I'm trying to do is get you to give me a reason why you don't have win rate or edge at the limit you're afraid of.
Okay.
I'm trying to get you 100% confident that you actually have a 5 BB win rate at 510. And I really want you to give me the next reason now that causes you to distrust that that's true. Because can we at least play this game? You have 100% confidence at 2-5 that you have
a winning player
because you've done it.
Yes.
And I'm saying there are reasons that you're creating in your head that we need to challenge the credibility of as to why 510 is substantially harder. If we don't do that, it's going to reinforce the success barrier because you're constantly going to be like, I don't know if my win rate is enough here. I don't know if the regs are that much better, and so I won't take the shot. We need to rationally press out more of the variables that could be, more of the uninvestigated variables that could stand between you and a 5 BB win rate at 510. Once we don't have any more objections, the conversation's over. You can pull a manual override on the success barrier and be like, I sat down and really mapped that out, and none of those objections actually made sense.
Right.
None of those were realistic.
So I don't have any anymore. There aren't any more objections.
Let's just sit for a minute then. Let's sit and let's play. Let's test it out. I want you to envision now taking the day off and going and playing 510 at the game that usually causes you some friction around sitting around. Like if you were to show up at the casino, like literally insert yourself into a visual where you are walking into the casino and it's time to put your name on the board and you've got the choice of throwing it up on 510 or 2-5. How much confidence do you now have that you have very certain win rate at the 510 game? And if there is a lack of confidence, let's find the unknown thing that we haven't discussed yet that's causing you to feel that way. Besides the fact that you just haven't done it yet. Like that's really the only objection that you have.
Sure. Yeah, we can agree that we don't know till we know, till we have a sample size, but that's not.
But we're
not trying to discover that. We're trying to discover if I believe that I have win rate there, and I do. Am I not allowed? Is it understandable that these two things I'm picturing? You're asking, do you have confidence that you have win rate at 510? And I have 900 hours at 8 big blinds an hour, so yes. But I was game selecting, but yes, long run, do I think I could sit in that game 2,000 hours a year? And
okay, so I
yes.
see what we're doing.
But if I envision walking in and you see this game, it's 2-5 and 5-10, I still feel this unease come up and this difficulty in me deciding and me going through what I go through. So yeah, like if it's understandable to still be at that stage, yes. Like I believe that I'm a winner in those lineups. And I still see...
And we would have to admit there is still not 100% certainty that we've calculated the inputs, right? Because like we really don't know. We're making assumptions that with such a high win rate at 2-5, and with most of that win rate being able to come from fish, it would be unlikely unless the 5-10 games are massively tougher for you not to have edge. And we've deduced that even though they are tougher, it's more assumptive to say that they're so tough that you'd be a loser.
Right. They're not massively tougher.
So I'm basically trying to get you to go all in on the lesser assumptive interpretation of the 5-10 game. And I see where we're at now. So it's like we can have this conversation and it works maybe 97%, but then there's that 3% fear that maybe we were too assumptive with our inputs. Maybe 5-10 was stronger than we actually expected. Like, how do we really know? And so we reach a point where we've done everything we can to rationally adjust how we perceive the model. We've made progress, and there is still uncertainty.
Right.
And the leftover uncertainty, which is really just the distance between you predicting that you're going to play that and win it and actually having the sample to prove it.
Okay.
Like that 3% is basically that we don't have that 3% anymore when you're at 2-5 because that 3% has been squashed by you proving it through action and reality. So there's this weird simulation that I sort of set up for a seminar that I'm going to eventually do. When we work with variance models, the beauty of those simulators is it can show you how many buy-ins you need to have less than 5% risk of ruin.
Right.
You plug your win rate in, it'll show you how. So if I have a 10 BB win rate, I might need 15 buy-ins to have a less than 5% risk of ruin.
Sure.
Now you can continue to increase win rate, and that number we can get risk of ruin lower. We can get it closer to zero, but we actually can never get it to
by
exactly
winning more
zero.
Or having more money.
Right. So there's always
never zero. Right?
There's always a risk of ruin.
Sure.
And that's not a problem unless we leave it to the interpretation of the irrational mind, which just never wants there to be any % chance that things could go completely bad. For the career perspective on this, I want people to understand that if you can get risk of ruin down to 1%, which you can if you use very modest bankroll strategy, just mature bankroll strategy, that is so much safer than a lot of the other corporate jobs that you could be taking because it's not posted on the wall of your cubicle that business or that corporate could restructure in the next 3 months and you could just lose your job. But that is a risk.
Yeah, most people are more than 5% to get laid off in the next 10 years anyway, right? Like
in the next 3 months.
Just aside, they just have no idea. All right.
So
they don't have a graph to look at.
So I'm glad that it came here because I'm glad it came here naturally because I want to remember that this is always the last step, is to see that we've come a very long way to prove that the rational path is to just give yourself the benefit of the doubt that you have win rate at 5-10, and we also have to paradoxically acknowledge that we can't prove it completely.
Fair.
We can't prove it completely, but, and this is my favorite part of this whole process, is if fulfillment and freedom, but greater freedom, greater fulfillment, greater expansion is your ultimate goal, happiness, whatever you want to call it. I think we could all get on board with that.
Yeah.
Seeing that we are at the threshold, 2-5, we've been here for a while, clearly something has to change or nothing's going to change. what is actually riskier based on your North Star, which is fulfillment? Is it riskier to take the 2% shot that you could fall back?
Right.
Or is it riskier to never take that shot and remain in a state of lower fulfillment or lower potential? If you frame it like that, suddenly the biggest risk you could take is staying.
Yeah, because you're 0% to move up if you stay, and you're 2% to have to come back down if you move up. So all you have is a 2% of back to where you're starting from, or you can just never leave and guarantee the worst result of trying.
But you have to be sure that this approach is futile before that actually clicks. The current approach, have you had enough exploration of that to convince yourself that that's futile? Because I really think that's an element of this.
I don't know. I mean,
do you need more time? Do you need more time? And now this was so funny because the entire conversation starts from an urgency against time.
Right.
And now the full circle moment is, Berk, do you need more time to continue to explore the futility of your paradigm? Because if you want more time, you'll get more time. And we could come back here 5 months or 5 years from now, and my question would now be the same, because we've distilled it down to the final question: have you had enough time? And do you see that if you're telling me that your goal is actually to expand towards North Star fulfillment, higher potential, this 2-5 stagnation path is never going there. 0% chance of going there. You're gonna have to step up, or you're not gonna break through the threshold. So at least now you would be able to see, like, the frustration should alleviate when you see that, well, it's not confusing to me anymore. If I'm saying I want this thing and not taking the necessary steps toward it, I don't have excuses anymore. Like, I'm just basically opting for underperformance at that point. Once you see that this is what's going to be required for you to get to the next paradigm or the higher stake, a lot of the frustration should diffuse, because it's now just a maybe it doesn't. Maybe the new frustration is, I wish I had the balls to just go.
Right.
Like, I dealt with that, and I still deal with that at every next level. Is like, okay, so in a lot of ways, it can be more tormenting to finally see it. I see what I'm doing to myself, and still, I can't get past the starting friction of just jumping through.